Hello, Garland Nixon here, hanging out with Andrei Martyanov. He of the Smoothie X12. We got plenty to talk about. We're gonna have a real interesting conversation. So stand by for this one. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here with Andrei Martyanov. And don't forget, I got a join button now. So you can join, you can become a member of the channel. I think it's like $4.99 a month or something like that. But that's certainly an option. All right. Andrei has a great blog. It's Reminiscence of the Future. And his great YouTube channel, which is Smoothie X12. Now, let me say this, and I like to do this sometimes. I like to go back on some of my favorite channels and I watch something from a year ago or several months back. And I would recommend that people do that because you'd be surprised how many times you go back and you watch something, you're like, holy crap, that was on the money, right? Early in the conflict, Andrei was talking about continental warfare. And one of the things that he talked about was that the NATO people don't understand the holistic nature of that, in that if you've got a country, they have to have a stable economy. They have to have industrial capacity. They have to have a diplomat, all these kinds of things that they have to have. It's not just, okay, we're going to get a certain kind of missiles and put those out and send them over to Ukraine. And now they've got the latest Wunderweapon, they'll win. Let's start off, Andrei. If you could kind of give us that kind of an overview of what you were talking about when you were saying, look, what they don't seem to understand here is it's a whole big machine if you're going to be involved in in major warfare.
Yeah, you titled it very properly, machine. And those people don't understand that you do not operate on the base of, some kind of you cannot put, let's put it this way, you cannot put into the machine, if you will talk about engine, for example, which is designed to work on the gasoline, you cannot pour water into it and expect that it will, just start working. No, you have to have combustible, fuels to start, to make the machine work. They never had it, and I'm writing about it nonstop, ad nauseam. I speak about it ad nauseam. That obviously everybody loves Sun Tzu, know yourself and know thy enemy and things of this nature, which is fine. I mean, yeah. But when you have people who do not understand themselves, let alone know thy enemy, and they go in and they, instead of some kitten, they encounter this machine, as you correctly stated, which fires on all cylinders, and those cylinders are the basically fields of the statesmanship, because statesmanship goes across the whole thing, of course, from economics to military to culture to social to other things, which have to combine together, and they create nation, and they create national passions, they create national mythology, and they create national ideas. And then suddenly they have and go into the country which survived way worse than United States. And that's what they don't understand, because they don't teach World War II history properly. And suddenly they encounter this and, oh my God, what are you going to do? Well, you're going to lose. They already lost. And this is what I was preaching nonstop. And many people do not understand that actually, if you want to go for the applied geopolitics 101, you have to completely dispose of this garbage of the Western economism, Western militarism, and understanding of warfare. You have to remove it completely and look at the history overall, like people of the scale of Michael Hudson do, obviously, or my good friend, and again, Mr. Fatih Lama does, and other people of this nature who look at this larger picture and apply proper criteria. At this stage, And there is no proper criteria in existence in Washington, D.C. among people who are decision makers or those people who shape those decisions. None. This is due to, lack of professionalism, which is correct, ignorance, lack of culture, and all other factors which combined presented us with what we thought would happen like in 15, 20 years, but now it happened like in the last 2 years, and this complete geopolitical realignment, which basically spelled the doom to the combined West, and now we're just into the new uncharted territory.
Well, one of the things that I found interesting very early is in the conflict is that Tony Blinken was going around threatening other countries. You better go along with us or else. And I saw Sergei Lavrov going around to Africa, the Middle East, going to Asia, places that the United States usually just kind of overlook. And he seemed to be bringing people on board, getting the support. So it seemed to me that the Russians viewed their diplomatic corps as an integral part of addressing this conflict. Can you, why is that? How is that? What are your thoughts on Sergei Lavrov's part in this, the important part of the diplomatic corps of Russia in this particular conflict?
Zhou Enlai, the Chinese premier in 1954, I believe, stated, he rephrased famous Clausewitz phrase that a war is the continuation of the politics by other means. And he stated that diplomacy is continuation of the war by peaceful means, which is absolutely true. This is absolutely 100% on point. And this is one of the best, one-liners ever. And this is exactly what happened. So, yeah, for some reason, those people in Washington and Brussels, because they communicate only with this, basically what comes down to the narrow circle of the cosmopolitan, it's not even elite, it's basically, it's kind of almost trash, I would say, of Russian, liberal, pro-Western people, who of course BS them to the point that those guys have been completely confused. They think that Russians are just, sleeping and dreaming of being integrated with the West and all that. That couldn't have been further from the truth from the get-go. And many people didn't understand that Russians were beginning to live already by 2010 the best that Russia lived in history. They never had it that good. Now, basically fast forward 10 years, and well, Russians are beginning to live better than Europe, most of it anyway. And so everybody looks at this and says, how this could have happened? Well, because as any normal person who has an appropriate even grasp of the reality, they go and they don't look on just those monetary indices, which mean absolutely nothing. All this International Monetary Fund and World Bank and things of this nature, which they present this economic data, statistics, most of it is bunk. It's all tied to US dollar, which absolutely meaningless for such country as Russia. Okay, but you begin to look at it, what is called composite index of the national capability, and you expand to what is, I preach it nonstop, 14 points by Jeffrey Barnett, which have been pointed out and listed in the U.S. Army War College publication parameters sometime at like 1990, and it was explanation of why the West leads the world, which was true at that time. And you begin to look at those 14 points. Out of those 14 points, 12 are all related to the productive forces which produce tangibles, ranging from aerospace to extraction equipment to all kinds of things. You have to produce, and altogether it could be summarized, which is called machine building complex. And they never saw it. They didn't understand it. They think like Wall Street. What do they know? Capitalization of some, fraud company like Facebook. Really? What is Amazon? It's postal service. Okay, yeah, it employs some people. It's nothing more than modern postal service. It's like, oh yeah, Jeff Bezos. there are those like thousands of those Bezoses standing in the wings, waiting when one collapses, because immediately others will come in. Yet, look at this. We don't have, we have to save now people from the International Space Station, which Boeing screwed them over so badly. And if the guy is kind of doing okay, this lady, she's Indian, she looks horrible. Everybody worried now if she's going to die on the orbit. And Russians cannot help it because they obviously have those chairs, they have to be fitted, exactly, to their, geometric size of cosmonauts and astronauts. And you look at this, my gosh, why don't you send Jeff Bezos there? And nothing you can do about it. This is the reality, okay? And for many people, that primarily, I don't know the percentage, most of in the US elite in Washington, D.C., they judge the world outside by the model of the iPhone and capitalization. This is basically the extent of their understanding of the world outside.
Yes. One of the things that became obvious to me very early in the conflict was the capability of that, because we're still staying on the diplomatic corps. Tony Blinken, his job for the last 20 years was to walk behind Joe Biden and carry his coat and umbrella if it rained. I mean, he had nothing, no background, nothing. When I look at the Chinese, when I look at the Russians, a lot of countries, it seems to me the diplomatic corps are people who started working for the foreign ministry and slowly work their way up. Their degrees, their advanced degrees, everything is in diplomacy. And the U.S. just takes some lunatic like Blinken, and he ends up in Kiev in some Nazi bar playing a guitar. And they think that this is diplomacy. If you could talk about the diplomatic, what you know about the diplomatic corps of Russia, how they're developed and things of that nature.
First, you have to understand that Georgetown or whatever the Foreign Service academies, they're primarily frauds. They're brainwashed, highly unskilled, very uncultured. Some of them manage to learn a couple of languages. That's the extent of their understanding. But the reality is, there is MGIMO, Russian, the famous Moscow Institute of the International Relations, okay? Large part of the MGIMO today is not that, competitive and prestigious. You can go there and study some international journalism, something like that, or some crap like, international, economic relations, what have you. And you can be sent at that time to work into some, today it's primarily private companies, but there are a couple departments there, okay, where they get guys there and girls, and they are on a serious, regimen, up to, at some point of time, getting the clearance of the 401A, which it means top secret and special significance things. And those are designed to be their top-notch diplomats. They are, honed constantly. And Sergei Lavrov, practically all Russian diplomatic corps, up to Maria Zakharova or Nebenzia, who is the permanent representative of Russia in the United Nations Security Council, or Russian ambassadors, all serious professionals with the decades of training in this field. And as the result, they go in, they know the country they go in to serve, unless, of course, we're talking about some real backwater where you can send somebody, just like. But if you talk about serious countries which matter, especially if you have the ambassadors to the United States, you have one of the top professionals in the world in the field of diplomacy. And because of that, they know their idiosyncrasies, they know language, they know culture, they know all things to start talking to people and communicate with them in such a way as to, of course, advance Russian national interest, but also not to insult or not to diminish or humiliate people. They will be talking to people in such a manner that to make them predispositioned to hear Russian national interest, and then going up in their governments and to do whatever they need to do. It doesn't always work naturally, but if you look attentively at Russian diplomacy, not in the United States today, because it's basically you cannot talk to anybody in Washington. They simply are not the same level to start with. So, but if you look attentively at India, you look at China, you look at countries which matter, you look at many African countries. Correct, absolutely. And you look at especially East Asia, like Indonesia, joining BRICS yesterday, officially full. This is 270 million people, all right? Is a gigantic economy, industrial economy, by the way. So, and when you look at this, that's what they do. They do this thing. They do diplomacy. They do this in a peaceful manner and in a respectful manner to their counterparts. And as a result, as when Putin had this African, basically, summit in and they said, why are you coming here? And they said, Russians, they always treated us as equals. They never treated us as some kind of, they always said, guys, what can we do for you? And what can you do for us? Let's kind of deal with this. And of course, naturally, large parts of Africa gravitate towards Russian sphere of interest, and that's what happens. Arabs are a more complex thing because, but on the 17th, we also have President of Iran signing the comprehensive treaty with Russia, including the defense, essentially military alliance. Okay, so there you go. That's Russian diplomacy at work.
It seems to me that the alliance, that the agreement that Russia and Iran are signing is, okay, sure, if somebody attacked Iran, Russia theoretically wouldn't be sending troops, but they would be giving them heavy support all the way up to that level. To me, it seems to me that it is also a deterrence. There's a deterrence factor there because Iran seems to me to be a critical part of the BRICS and of Russia's. That's the other thing. I got to say this. The U.S. seems to see other countries as you have to do what we want. And Russia seems to see them like Iran is. They are a critical part of our future and our alliance. Anyway, your thoughts on what that alliance means to Russia and the kind of, what does that mean when we say a quote military alliance, and understanding that it doesn't mean Russia's going to march troops in there to fight with him, but what does that mean to you, that kind of alliance?
Well, we have to keep in mind until, of course, it's signed and we will be given a little bit of the peek inside the structure of this agreement, basically treaty. But do not forget, for example, North Korea, Russia has a full military alliance to the point that if somebody attacks North Korea, Russia gets in big time, So Korea, that's why Kim was so happy. The same goes for Koreans, as that's what precipitated all this pathetic lies about the North Koreans fighting somewhere which is complete garbage. But if it's going to be this level with Iran, possible. How probable it is, I don't know. We have to wait and see on the 17th. But definitely that opens the huge market also. Essentially, what Russia did when they signed their treaty with North Korea, it was more than just military alliance. It was breaking through the blockade, essentially, and opening huge economic future and prosperity for North Korea, which suffered enough. Obviously they are dictatorship, and we know that. Nobody pretends that they are some kind of liberal democracy, but neither is Europe anymore. So
neither is the United States.
Yeah, well, at least for now, yeah. But the point is, will it go with Iran? I think so, but it definitely opens also. It's a 90 million population country, and it is very industrialized country. It is a huge market also. And will they get the latest toys? Or we can bet our behinds on that they are already getting those latest toys. And this is in preparation, for who knows what those people in Israel will just, and the United States will decide to do. And that is a possibility. So how probable it is, we will know probably after the 17th, when we will have some kind of, the formulations and a peek into this treaty. So yeah, and Iran is critical part of Russia economic future. It is gigantic market. They will be the recipients, for example, if anybody thinks that Russia right now already has 40 airframes of MS-21 and Sukhoi Superjet, new, all Russified, totally Russian. Everything in them is Russian, from engines to avionics. Guess what? Iran would love to have those. And guess what? Oh, because obviously nobody gonna sell him any Airbus, let alone Boeings. And Russians keep this in mind, and so does Iran. They need to change their essentially fleet. So it's all the game of quids and quid pro quos. So I scratch your back, you scratch mine. And things of this nature. That's how it should work, actually. And this is how the checks and balances are established. And then you sign this treaty, and suddenly you are, well, gosh, just what many people do not know. The Astrakhan already building, part of it is already built, a large shipyard. And there are other shipyards along Volga, and which are building already those specifically Caspian Sea container carriers. You have to look it up. They are not gigantic like this, but there are many of them. So that means what? There will be a railroad line, which already is being built through Azerbaijan to Iran. And then, of course, you have Caspian Sea route. And that's, this is the huge trade. There's a lot of things Russia and Iran can trade with. So, and that tells you just how Russians move and build this north-south corridor, of which Iran, of course, is critical part.
Let me ask you this. Iran's supposed to be getting Su-35s, I understand. I understand maybe they've already taken delivery of some. I don't know a lot about the Su-35s. I guess you're familiar with them. Tell us a little bit about the Su-35 and why that really, I've heard people say that changes the game in the Middle East if Iran's got ends up with a fleet of Su-35s and maybe other Russian aviation units. What is it about the Su-35 that is such a game changer as far as being able to defend themselves in the Middle East for Iran?
It is generation 4++ combat aircraft. Everybody knows what they can do maneuverability wise. They have no equals, with the exception of Su-57 and Su-30 SMs, which can do that. No F-22 or F-35 can even touch it in terms of what they can do. People call it essentially air ballet. But these are fully net-centric aircraft. That means each aircraft can serve both, considering a huge range of their, people say, oh, it's not, active electronically scanned array, it's only passive electronically scanned array. Those radar they have there, they have an immense range, and they can operate as the system, as the group, between the group of the similar aircraft. They have the capability to have what is called the dedicated wingman. That means what drone or many drones. They can control swarms of drones, and they can obviously communicate with the satellite and even ground stations. And they obviously are fully integrated into the network of the A-50Us, which are, of course, Russian version of AVAX, but it's not really Russian versions. Russians actually were first of building AVAX, early warning and battle management aircraft. And when you look at this also carries the missile which terrifies the whole world. It's called R-37. It is beyond visual range on steroids. It's range up to 400 kilometers, and it has been already successfully. Just think about it. It was called AVAX killer because essentially any Su-35 or Su-57, which is also the carrier of this missile, gets in the range, it shoots down the AVAX, and guess what? That's it for any, the NATO type Air Force, because they only can operate on this kind of premise, having somebody vector them to somewhere. And they say the F-35 has these capabilities. I don't think so. And so when you look at that, this is an immense aircraft. And evidently, the talk is, we don't know, But there is a very interesting thing, however, to keep in mind. Iran, which actually hints on something. Iran actually has 6 Yakovlev 130. These are state-of-the-art trainers and light bombers, light, attack aircraft. It's two-seater and it's state-of-the-art, glass cockpit, all things like that. And what is interesting in this machine, it is the only machine in the world which you can set up, for example, literally push the button, and it's going to fly as F-35 or F-22 or, and it obviously can fly, especially in the under combat conditions in Su-35. It is an excellent step towards that, graduating into the extremely advanced combat aircraft, such as Su-35. And once Iran gets this, and people, yes, as you already stated, people say they already took delivery of them. We don't know who were those Iranian pilots, flying them and all that. Evidently, they have underground facilities in Iran where they can hide or store not just missiles, but aircraft. And in this case, who knows what is going to be and how it will work out? Who knows? But yeah, Russia is prepping Iran to face whatever is going to be going its way. And as this much advertised strike of Israel on Iran was, it turned out to be extremely ineffective. Yeah, they hit some targets there, but primarily they were early detected, and so they were repulsed.
Let me ask you this from the political perspective. I had one of the my guest was saying that the Russians understand something, and that is, and I read an interesting book. Where is it? People's Army, People's War, General Diop's book about how the Vietnam defeated the French and ran them out. It was an interesting book, good book, great book. And one of the things that the discussion, and you never get that here. Here's what's interesting. They just said to Americans, okay, we're going to Ukraine, shut up. And a lot of I know a lot of people that voted for Trump that didn't even like Trump. But what they said was this: I'm sick and tired of all this money going to Ukraine, and times are hard here and things are difficult. I'll give him a shot. Literally, they would try, the old saying, any place is better than here, right? One of the things that they seem to get in Russia is you got to keep the people happy. If you've got a conflict and the people at home have to feel like there's some stability. We got food, we have work, we have, what I mean? There's some stability. And here they're just like, we're going to do this Ukraine thing. And people were saying, but we're hurting. Your thoughts on the government in Russia focusing on having some political stability at home and taking that into account with how they dealt with this Ukraine conflict?
Russians are primed in terms of warfare dramatically different than Americans, because it runs in Russia in blood, especially after the World War II, and 27 million who have been killed, by Axis, essentially. And so Russians take their wars very seriously. And in this particular case, even despite the fact that Russia also experiences this very similar problems with, for example, Zoomers who are morons, essentially, and things of this nature. And of course, there's suddenly this prosperity, this wealth, which has been created, it tends to make people softer. But let me tell you, yesterday, even what would they are France for CIA, MI6, or like this Medusa or Levada polling, they are all controlled. This essentially, even Levada, polling center admit that Putin has support of more than 80 plus percent of 80+% of Russian population, and that's support not just for the Putin, the support for policies, and that support for the special military operation is overwhelming. And Russians understand what is this all about, what kind of game is being played, especially by the combined West. That is why I am on the record, and this happened was started to happening since 2014, but in 2022 it all came to a head. I never in my life, I'm 62 years old, and I'm Cold Warrior 1.0 issue. I never in my life did I see so much contempt, if not hatred, towards combined West among Russian population, including very many youth. And here is indicator. Russian army get every day, every freaking day. As today we will finish this, the evening will come today, the 8th of January. By the end of the day, the same date in Russia, more than 1,000 volunteers will be enrolled. They will come into the military commissariats and say, please, I want to sign the contract. I want to go fight in the special military operations. Americans have no experience of that. They absolutely have no understanding what it is for Russians. Scott once, about a year and a half, I believe, he stated a profound thing. I was stunned that Scott got it that big time, He was explaining what war is for Russians, and he said 27 millions of their relatives are looking from their up down on them. And this is, and that is why when you explain it, that is why the spiritual, moral, ethical, and emotional imprint of Russian soldier is so dramatically different from whatever exists, and Russians have the same esprit de corps as, for example, U.S. Army or U.S. Air Force have. But the emotional and spiritual imprint and cultural cannot get any further from that, because people have to remember, not a single U.S. serviceman, officer, general, NCO, whatever, ever fought in defense of the United States, period. If you will tell me how many panzer divisions attacked and destroyed Chicago, or what was the siege of Boston, which have lost 1.5 million people as the result of the constant shelling, and guys, it's not even comparable, and it has nothing to do with Russian, Russian rah-rah. It has nothing to do with it. People do not understand that Leningrad alone for 900 days lost more people, majority of them civilians, to hunger and shelling, to basically genocidal, blockade, than the United States lost in all of its wars combined. It's like, and that was 900 days. So that is why when people come to Russia and say, oh, in civil war, they're like, guys, look up Borodino Battle 1812, okay? And don't come here even discussing it. Russians remember this. They live by that. My grandfathers, they have been killed in World War II. One of them have been killed in 1941 at Donetsk. So it's just like, yeah, sure, try somewhere else. And this is what happens. And that is why they thought that, oh, yeah, we're going to hit them and the Russians will begin to take casualties and, Putin's regime will be destabilized from the inside. They better start learning a real history of warfare, and especially of World War II.
Well, I when I worked at Sputnik, I worked with a number, with Russians. And I remember talking to one friend of mine, and she said she lost both of her grandfathers in World War II. And we were talking, and she said, well, you don't understand. I said, what? She says, everybody I knew in my community growing up, everyone lost both of their grandfathers, brothers, everyone, that wherever she came from, all the men went to war from her town, and none of them came back. They were all, so it was a total different mindset there as far as war is concerned. Let me ask you this. I do want to ask you about World War II because I know you know about it. What was the number of divisions? How many German soldiers, how many German divisions did the Russians fight on the Eastern Front, on the Russian front, as opposed to those that faced the Allies in, Normandy, etc., the rest of Europe?
Well, it wasn't just the number, which was, I believe, altogether, Russians annihilated from 1941 to 1945 more than 80% of Axis forces. And those were the best creme de la creme. Fact is, Wehrmacht has been degraded from 1941 to 1942 dramatically, as was Luftwaffe. By the time of the Kursk battle happening, Wehrmacht was already basically, how to put it, not what it was in 1940, 1941. And then, of course, by the time Allies landed in Normandy, Russians launched Operation Bagration, which even Churchill admitted Red Army toward the guts of the Nazi Germany. It's they just literally obliterated the Army Group Center, took tens upon tens of thousands of, well, actually more than 100,000 prisoners, annihilated 300,000. It just was absolute destruction and moved almost 500 kilometers. One of the reasons why those 57,000 German generals and soldiers and officers have been marched through Moscow in 1944. It was in July. No, it was in August, I believe. It was because Western press was already stating, oh, yeah, it's not true that the scale of this, So, well, what Russians did, they just took part of those and just marched them in the front for the whole world to see. You can look it up on YouTube. And many people don't understand. 57,000 was only in Moscow. There were some in Leningrad, some in Minsk. And so there you go. And after that, they shut up. But evidently, as Rokossovsky stated to Zhukov, the rumor has it, but many people heard it actually. He said it in Berlin in 1945, that we liberated them from Nazism and they will hate us for that. Which happened exactly like this.
Well, apparently they didn't liberate them quite enough from Nazism.
Yeah.
Because they liberated them, but it didn't take but so much. What was the other thing I wanted to talk about? Economic. What I find interesting is that the NATO, the U.S. empire, and its vassals, it seems to me their big plan, the biggest part of their plan was get Russia into this war and then sanction them out of business. Mm-hmm. That they thought that we're going to lay these sanctions on Russia, that'll be it. That it'll knock them off, they'll fall to pieces, you know what I mean? The usual, the people will turn on Putin and then blah, blah, blah. Why is it that Russia seems to have gotten economically stronger? In fact, I think when Tucker Carlson was interviewing Sergei Lavrov, I mean, it seemed to me in jest, kind of jokingly, almost implied like, well, we don't want to get you rid of the sanctions because we're doing a whole lot better. We may not want, I mean, I'm sure it was a joke, but why is it?
Well, it was half joke.
Yeah. But why is it that it seems that the Russian economy seemed to improve and strengthen when all of these sanctions happened?
Well, it was simple. First, Putin, when he came together with a team of Siloviki, what is the power agencies, essentially, Ministry of Defense, FSB, SVR, which is foreign. So these are the people who have been involved into all this big time, into intelligence and military industrial complex and things of this nature. They understood what was done to Russia economically in 1990s. as he already stated, those people, including Yeltsin's government, I quote Putin from a couple of weeks ago, they decided to destroy the country. And they were doing this quite well. Where do we destroy the country? You go in and you subordinate your financial system to US dollar, and then you deindustrialize. And this is what they've been doing for almost more than 10 years, 15 years, actually. And it took an enormous effort to get Russia back onto industrial things, and when obviously collect, so to speak, accumulate the wealth through the sale of hydrocarbons and things of other nature. And you know what? Russians were rebuilding their industry starting from already 2005. And what Putin understood correctly, which, as I already stated, I write about this for 2 decades, actually, that first you restore military-industrial complex, because in history, it was always military which drives the human progress. Just give you x-rays, give you antibiotics, and we can go on and on and on. What war, that is why Aristotle correctly stated, the war is the father of everything. But it's sad, but it is the reality. And when they understood that national security and Russian industry and military-industrial complex are the same thing, that's what happened. And then once you begin to produce, it's like, this feeling everybody knows, that you sleep and then you wake up and your hand is numb, because of that. What do? You start trying to, move your fingers, to unnumb it. This is exactly what was happening. But then once you begin to produce it, and suddenly Russia becomes, if anybody doesn't remember, from 2015, Russia became the net exporter of the food, from grain to sausages to meat to what have you, and it was like, wow, and after that, everything else started to go. And at this stage, well, I will not disclose anything specific, but in the company I worked for, which was the subcontractor of Boeing, when we get along with the Boeing engineer, the Boeing program engineer, extremely well. And he said, already in 2015, 2016, Boeing is terrified of MS-21. Because if it goes on, in the competition, that will be, oh my God. So that's where the sanctions coming from, to stop, to impede, any kind of development. But you know what? Russians were always, if you look attentively at Russian officer corps and Russian military, it played gigantic role in Russian culture, science. And look attentively at Mr. Tolstoy. Who was Mr. Lev Tolstoy, Leo Tolstoy? He was artillery officer. He fought in the Crimean War. And you look attentively, Dostoevsky was the fortification officer. So it's just among the Russian writers to start with. And you can go into scientists, and all of them worked for Russian military, and even during the Tsarist times. And then who was Sergei Korolev? He started learning the aeronautics already during that early age. And Zhukovsky, who is obviously the founder of Russian aviation. And it's like, you look at this, just, my God, people study Russian history, So, and that's what happened. They restored industry, and they restored military-industrial complex, which, as I already stating, since 2019, when I wrote the second book, which is called The Real Revolution in Military Affairs, I already stated for the first time that combined West and United States lost the arms race. Technologically, U.S. armed forces, I'm not even talking about these, losers in Europe. They are obsolete, essentially, for the modern warfare. And special military operation demonstrated it in full. And then, of course, Oreshnik happened, and everybody understood that, hypersonic era is here, and only Russia has the full-blown, combat-tested hypersonic weaponry, which is of all kinds, and it works dramatically well. And what are you going to do? How are you going to stop it? You can't.
Right. One of the things I think that's interesting economically, and I don't hear this discussed, and that is that while Russia did in fact decide to move on on into Ukraine to enter the conflict for numerous reasons. They had to protect their border and their strategic border, everything. But additionally, one of the outcomes is, my understanding is, Ukraine, they've got very great, excellent soil for growing. They have mines. They have educated, skilled workforce and Russia has picked up port cities, etc. That one of the things, as successful as Russia was economically growing, it seems to me that the regions that they're picking up in Ukraine is going to give them, like I said, you're getting an educated, knowledgeable workforce. That Ukraine historically was an integral part of the Soviet Union's economy, and that it will be integrated back into the Russian Federation economy and will dramatically strengthen the Russia's economic foundation.
What Russia controls now, in terms of those, well, she will control now 4 of them fully, and then of course we're probably going to get into, we can foresee that there could be Kharkov. There's nothing in Nikolaev. The old Nikolaev famous shipyard, which was building aircraft carriers, is not there anymore. It's been torn apart, corrupted, completely sold out to scrap and all that. But it's 80% of actually industrial capacity of Ukraine. It was primarily concentrated in those. For example, what you call this batteries nowadays with lithium ion.
Yes.
Russians took 2 days ago the largest lithium mines in Europe. And this is just like that, and Donetsk itself was all this colossal, the coal and steel and iron and all this producing thing. But that's what many people don't understand. Russia produces iron and steel put together. The output is larger than that of the United States. When you tell this to people, people are like, what the hell? Yeah, look it up, my friends. Russia produces more iron and steel than the United States. So, and many people still don't get this, scale of things. And this is what the part of this composite index, of the national capability. Of course, yes, you get a lot of resources in Ukraine. In terms of soil, considering the scale of the hostilities and the combat, that will take some time to really ameliorate it or what have you, secure. So, but in terms of industrial, there was some real unique industrial facilities there. Just to give you an example, Lugansk alone, they had this very advanced rolling stock company, the huge, plant, which was producing all kinds of those engines, diesel and electric locomotives and things like that. Yeah.
Was that the Motor Sich? Was that the, what is it, Motor Sich plant?
No, Motor Sich actually was bombed today. Motor Sich is the last thing which they want to preserve because obviously it was producing their turbines, for the aircraft, Motor Sich. The Zarya project is the other thing which produces turbines for the ships. And I think so Russians are not really going at it as they went against Yuzhmash for a reason, because eventually they will fall back into Russian hands. And why not to, restore Motor Sich? You will need to get people busy in order for them to maintain some kind of the semblance of the civil order. Those will be still quarantined territories for a while, because you need to, well, that's the whole cultural thing going on there. And but today, they bombed something. They launched something at Motor Sich. What? Difficult to say. There is only the office building which is burning. They've shown it, but whatever was hit there, we will not know for a while.
Now, what about ports? Because I know that was one of the issues that Russia had, not having warm water ports. But hasn't Russia also picked up some port cities? And isn't that for Russia extremely important?
Mariupol on Azov Sea, of course, is huge. And but it's huge not only in terms of the port itself, which is of course important. It is also the fact that Mariupol will be turned into it's a wonderful places there at Azov Sea. It's a wonderful resort towns, it's a warm, shallow sea, and there could be resort zones. They are already being restored there, So, and now the question is about Nikolaev. Yeah, Nikolaev is a decent port and the large. Then, of course, Odessa. But Odessa will have to wait and see. But in the end, you know what? Once you remove or make the regime collapse in Kiev, after that, it's just a matter of how you will arrange things. Russia can get probably at some point of time the access to Odessa without even trying to necessarily to do anything military. But we have to wait and see. We are in this arrangement phase, and Russia will dictate conditions, obviously. How it should.
I don't know if you saw it. There was I watched it. I think Jamal Thomas had it on his. If you give me 1 second,
Sure.
I think I can find it, and I think it's in doggone it. Let me find it. Give me 1 second. He had a
Sure.
He had if I can find it, maybe.
Take your time. I'm here.
Yeah. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Okay, let's look at this. So this is interesting, I think. And this is a video of Donald Trump talking about the conflict. And I want to get your thoughts on it. And I'll tell you why. Because for the last 4 years, we've heard nothing but absurdities. We've had nothing but, just the crazy neoliberal narrative, right? And I listen to Trump and I'm like, well, they try to say he's a madman and all this stuff. But let's listen.
The problem was Russia for many, many years, long before Putin said you could never have NATO involved with Ukraine. It's been written in stone.
Can you hear it?
And somewhere along the line, Biden said, no, they should.
Can you hear that okay?
Somewhat. I'm don't worry, just run it.
Okay.
Be able to join NATO. Well, then Russia has somebody right on their doorstep, and I could understand their feeling about that. But there were a lot of mistakes made in that.
Well, here's my point. And it's a little low, but if you listen to it, what Trump says is, hey, NATO came to Russia's doorstep, and he said they were upset, and I can understand. And there was mistakes made. I'm listening to him, and I'm like, for the first time in 4 years, I've heard somebody talk about a conflict from a perspective of reality. He says, because I've said, all people have said, can he get a deal or whatever? And I said, well, he's got to be realistic. And I've said, Trump's fight is not with the Russians. If he's reasonable, the Russians are reasonable. His fight are with the lunatics in the deep state here. But he says right out, and I'm looking at, and I'm thinking, I've been watching these crazies for 4 years, and I'm looking at it, an American statesman say, basically, hey, we came up to their border and threatened them. And if they came up to our border and threatened them, we'd be pissed. Your thoughts on that?
Well, Mr. Trump has 12 days before he should come out there after taking the oath and taking the Oval Office. He already prepares this, and he's talking about Biden's fault, and which is true. And he has 12 days before he can make that whole cluster coitus, okay, in Europe and Ukraine, Biden's and Democrats' deal.
Mm-hmm.
If he begins to play his usual self, in literally instance, within the first 2 weeks, he will have this war associated with himself as the man who, I took over Biden and we're going to support Ukraine and all that. Sure, he can support whatever he wants. United States doesn't have wherewithal to do this anymore on any serious basis, but it will become his war. So he has, it's obviously very encouraging to hear that he says basically talks about
The
the
truth.
foundation. Yeah,
The
which is
truth.
true.
The
Everybody
truth.
said, yeah, you move NATO to your border, you get what you get. And so that's good. So maybe he thinks that it's about time to accelerate and put the blame onto Biden, which it squarely belongs there, absolutely. But then the rest of it will be, well, how about he changes rhetoric about in terms of the Russia being the existential enemy for the United States. Once he changes that, who knows? Russians may be accommodating, So, and he might go out, as I already stated, and proclaim himself, I'm the peacemaker and I'm so great. He loves to talk about it. But I mean, Mr. Kellogg, obviously, he said, oh yeah, 100 days now. We need to stop this conflict. He postponed his visit to Kiev. I don't know. He can go there whatever he wants, but he needs to know what is Russian position. Russian position has been articulated so many times on so many occasions from such high podiums like Putin, Medvedev, Lavrov, and people like that, it's at this point of time, it's all, they're ball in United States corner, So, and again, Russia will talk only to Washington. Russians are not going to take to Europeans at all. So there's nobody there to discuss anything with them.
Well, the thing is, I think personally, Trump despises Zelensky. I think he hates his guts.
Yeah,
I really do. And I mean, those guys tried to screw him. Who wouldn't? I think he hates Macron and all. I think he literally hates these people. But I mean, they tried to stab him in the back. Hey, that's politics. If you shoot at the king and miss, you got a big problem. And they went after the king and missed. And now they got a problem because he's king again. And I wouldn't want to be in their shoes. I tell you that much. The other thing is this. One of the things that's discussed here, and this is important, the issue of training, because, I was in law enforcement, and I mean, bottom line is we trained, I did a lot of firearm training and stuff like that. And if, you watch these movies and some guy has a gun and he just sticks it out and he starts firing all over the place. And I've had people that we've started off, I'd say, oh, good, now hit the target. And they couldn't hit the side of a barn with a beach ball. You know what I mean? And you train them, and now the gun comes out of that holster so fast, and they got 3 rounds off before, you can blink an eye, right? They get faster and faster, more and more accurate. Here's my point. The Ukrainians now are talking about, let's bring in more people, these 18-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
It would take 6 months to a year to get them competent to even do the basics, much less to be competent soldiers. What kind of training when the Russian army brings, you told me these people, they're standing in line. I want to go defend the fatherland or the motherland, whatever you call it, right? I want to defend my homeland. What kind of training are these soldiers going to go for before they'll be sent to the front lines to fight in a unit? And why is that important?
Well, they probably will go at least half a year, if not longer, for the basic military training, both on personal level and then, of course, within the subunits, such as squads and then platoon level type things. And this, we're talking about the, so to speak, people who are grunts, essentially, okay? So they will be taken in by the professionals. You will have the instructors who went through the special military operation, become successful fighters, both on the NCO level and, of course, officer level. There are many officers with the incredible combat experience who are capable of teaching, especially on the company and battalion level, properly, provide proper training. So by the time they get to the after the rear, they will still get into the what is called ranges, near frontline ranges, and they will be trained there again by the guys who are coming back. Guess what? Those guys who come back from the after rotation to the tactical operation rear, guess what they're doing? They rest and then they train. They go back on range. They go, they shoot, they move, they do maneuvering, they do all kinds of things, So, and after that, they will be kind of seeded into their already experienced combat hardened, if you wish. I hate this combat hardened thing, but they will be seeded as small parts into the units which already are highly experienced in the combat. And then that's when they starts this, a tribal knowledge, training on the job and things of this nature. But they will have already very good fundamentals in terms of understanding what they will be doing on the front line or in the tank, let alone in the tanks or APCs. But if you talk about the air defense or electronic warfare, that's the whole other level. Okay, this is absolutely different type of the activities, but still they will be trained, including on the basis of the training centers around military academies. For example, Yaroslavl, city of Yaroslavl, has an outstanding air defense military academy. Now, guess what? They have obviously the level training there, not only just for the officers who go out there, prepared engineers and specialists in the, all kinds of air defense matters, apart from the regular warfare. They go and those people will be placed into the NCO type schools where they will study for 2-3 years, and they will become NCOs with the proficient in radio electronics, radar, and things of this nature. So this is machine. That's what I'm saying. This is machine. Ukraine, first, I posted it very many times. Russians know extremely well how Americans fight, or how they want to think that they can fight in terms of, and there are a number of statements by Ukrainian commanders, some of them taken prisoners of war, others going on record in the Ukrainian media. And I can quote you one of them. He said, if we would fight as the American or NATO field manuals prescribe us to do, we would be killed immediately. There you go. What can I say? Mr. Syrski, the general who, he graduated, Moscow Combined Arms, military academy. Well, he did in 1984 or 85. I think so, if not even later, probably 89 or something like that. And he's younger than me. But the point is, since 2014, he was the guy who was responsible for the armed forces of Ukraine to be brought to NATO standards, including NATO fighting doctrine, including all those field manuals, U.S. Army, doctrinal publications, and things like that. They trained them like this. Guess what happened? They lost more than 1 million killed alone. Not to speak about 2 million, And the question is not that they were the best proxy in American history. They are so much better than when people talk about the South Vietnam. Oh, don't even go there. This was, at that time of the start of special military operation, the best European army by far. It would make look French, let alone Bundeswehr, like amateurs. And guess what? You know what happened. The Russians are now obliterating the 4th iteration of this army. And guess what? Yeah, they're going to take those 18-year-old kids, get them 3 days of the so-called training. They will show them how to assemble, disassemble Kalashnikov. They will show them how to shoot. And then they will pump them with the drugs and throw them into the meat grinder. And they will be killed. Simple as that. This is how they fight.
Wow. I think that, one of the things I think, we're at an hour, we're just about out of time, but I will throw this at you. Morale is important. You're fighting for something. You're defending your homeland, defending your family, defending something or other, right? Okay.
Yeah.
I think that once Trump comes to January 20th, I still ain't convinced that these fascists here are going to allow him to come to power. But let's just cross our fingers and hope there's a smooth transition, because God only knows what will happen if there isn't. It's going to be hard for the Ukrainians to maintain their fighters. They're saying it's going to take 6 months. If you're in the Ukrainian military and you're in Ukraine and the president of the United States is saying, I'm in this thing, this is out. You're not getting, first of all, if Trump's in, you ain't getting the bullets and the rounds and all the things like you used to get. These spineless jellyfish in Europe are going to do an about face. They ain't standing up to front Trump. They won't stand up to anybody. And might I add, 1 month after the election in the US, the Germans have an election. Starmer, he's got one foot in the political grave and the other on the patch of ice. He's on the way out. Macron, he's struggling to hold on. So my point is, I don't see how the Ukrainians can even hold their army together once Trump comes in, because they're not going to have the resources, and the people there are going to know, what are we fighting for? The people back, Trump's trying to end this thing, and their leadership is trying to hold on to it. If they even try to, they may do an about face. None of those people have any spine. They may do an about face when Trump comes in. I don't think the Ukrainian leadership and the oligarchs that are just filling their filthy pockets, they're going to want to try to get away with all their money. They may not even stand up to Trump if he says, I want out. Anyway, your thoughts?
I mean, it doesn't matter. The United States first doesn't have a wherewithal now to support this to start with, because until it completely demilitarizes itself. Because you can send only so many Patriot missiles, and the production is minuscule, actually, when you look at compare US and European NATO productions of all kinds of the ammunition stocks, from artillery shells to, let alone, the complex weapon systems such as obviously tanks and air combat aircraft and air defense complexes, air defense missiles, and things of this nature. So yeah, it doesn't matter. But obviously, even New York Times yesterday admits that they don't have force left to actually sustain the fighting anymore. Even New York Times admits that. And there is another thing. After the Russians liberated Kurakhova, which was, and they killed yet another 12,000, the division, they just wiped out the division of armed forces of Ukraine there. Then suddenly Russian Defense Ministry comes out 2 days ago, and pronounces this dreadful phrase for people in Pentagon who study anything about real warfare. And they said, for the first time, Russian army is in the operational expanse, operational space. What does it mean? It doesn't have any significant defenses in front of it, if any.
So they're just moving across the open.
And now they sit in Washington, and somebody has to explain to this loser Blinken, or Sullivan, who wouldn't know first thing about anything, what it means, all it means. And now because obviously they are brought up and educated on the Hollywood movies about war, they might get this unpleasant thing of Russians driving towards Dnieper River, so it's like, what are we gonna do? Before that, they can sell this BS, pseudo academic and pseudo military BS about Russians moving slowly and things like that. Now, well, we'll see. As I already stated, Russians are not there. They never were really in the territorial conquest, except for the regions which have been already announced. But now that we are within the collapse of the front, once Russians go beyond Kursk Oblast, guess what? They will get into the Sumy region. Sumy falls, and yeah, what's left? You go to Kharkov. Do Russians need Kharkov per se? I don't know, honestly. So there are very many hostile people there. Why would Russians take them and put them on the balance of the Russian state, provide them with the social benefits and monetary benefits, and they will still hate you, and they will stab you in the back whenever they can? Yeah, it doesn't work like this. Who are the most delayed people in the Sheremetyevo Customs and Border Patrol today, which is the major airport? Ukrainians. They are not allowed in Russian territory for many days. They live in the airport. I'm sorry, guys. Those who wanted to immigrate, they actually already did it in the 2014, 15, and so on. And except for the Donetsk, and now what you have the second wave of those Ukrainians who run abroad into the European Union, where they're being kicked out. So they want to come now. They do come into the Sheremetyevo International Airport, one of three major airports in Russia. And guess what? They are surprised that they are held at the customs and border guards points for days, and a huge number of them is pretty much sent back, because once FSB runs files and internal affairs, the police and all that, and they say, you know what, no, guys, you do not fit the criteria. Bye-bye. And they turn them around. And they go back from wherever they come, because obviously once they were out of Ukraine, they started to look at alternative media, and they suddenly look at Russia. It's like, oh my God, this is much better place than Germany or Poland. Let's go there. Oh no, it doesn't work like this anymore. For Europeans, who normal people who want to live by normal conservative values, the door is open. For Ukrainians, no.
Yeah, well, and they come to Russia, they don't have to worry about misgendering anyone.
Yeah,
Russia's only got 2 genders.
Yes, it's like, can you imagine this? This is constitutionally approved, and that is why so many Germans, French, there are Americans, Canadians going, to Russia and live, and totally understandable. If you have small children, you know what? If you want to preserve your children and to grow up to be normal, mentally and well educated, yeah, Russia is the way. For us, it's too late. My children are one of them will be 40 coming soon. So but the point is that, yeah, that's what happens. And those guys, those freeloaders, they say, oh yeah, let's go to Russia. Let's get those social benefits. Let's go. There's especially this maternal capital thing, and like, oh yeah, and Russians say, nope, you're not coming here. There you go.
We'll end it with this, because I know we're just about out of time. I want to thank everybody for watching. Here's something I'm gonna on the record. I'm gonna make a prediction that when Trump comes in and his people start looking around, they're going to look at the military and say to the Pentagon, "How we fix for money?" And they're going to say, "We're broke. They've already spent all the money for the year. How we fix for missiles and weapons? We're pretty much out." That when he sees when they look and see what's left, the Biden administration have wrecked everything. They got nothing. They're going to be shocked when they look at their military and realize the cupboards are bare. They're out of weapons. They're out of military. Might I add, the people in the military are getting out. Nobody wants to join. I mean, when they see this skeleton shambles of what's left from the Biden administration, they will be shocked to the core. That's a prediction I have, and I think it's true.
I agree. I agree with you completely. Biden's Biden administration ran this country into the ground. It's not just military. They just absolutely violated every single law and the U.S. Constitution, and this is just violation of the common sense and decency. So we'll see. I agree with your prediction, though.
Yep. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Don't forget Reminiscence of the Future. That's Andrei's great blog. You can go there and read all of his work there. And of course, Smoothie X12, that is his YouTube show. And it's a great show. I never miss one. They're really good. You'll learn a lot from them. Thanks a lot, Andrei, and look forward to having you back soon.
My pleasure.
Also, everybody, make sure you share this on all your social media platforms. And don't forget, if you can join, we got a join button. Join and become a member. If not, that's fine. Just share this everywhere. Thanks. We're out.
Bye-bye.
All right.